Welcome to Rewatch or Return, the podcast where we put movies through the ultimate test across 10 universal categories to decide, does it call for a definite rewatch, a definite trip to the return bin, or does our subjectivity cause it to fall somewhere in between? This week, we're going to go into week 2 of October as we check out our suspenseful thriller, whatever you want to call it, seasonal films, and jump into Hollow Man, a Kevin Bacon, Elizabeth Shue, Josh Brolin film about the Invisible Man, essentially. With that said, let's jump right into Fast Forward Facts. Alright, let's fade into the shadows and crank up the creepy factor because Hollow Man was the Invisible Man thriller of the Y2K era. Equal parts science fiction, spectacle, and psychological horror. Released in August of 2000, Hollow Man was directed by Paul Verhoeven, the mind behind ultra-violent cult hits like RoboCop, Total Recall, and Starship Troopers. Known for mixing sci-fi with satire, Verhoeven took a more serious horror thriller approach here, but still loaded it with his trademark edge and visual flair. The movie stars Kevin Bacon as Dr. Sebastian Cain, a brilliant but arrogant scientist who develops a serum that can turn living beings invisible. When he volunteers to test it on himself, he becomes the titular Hollow Man and slowly descends into madness unchecked by morality, consequences, or even his own reflection. Elizabeth Shue co-stars as Linda McKay, Sebastian's ex and fellow scientist, and Josh Brolin, in one of his earlier genre roles, plays Dr. Matt Kensington, forming a tense love triangle inside a top-secret underground lab. As Sebastian's sanity slips, so does the safety of everyone around him. Behind the scenes, Hollow Man was a major leap in visual effects. The invisibility sequences were groundbreaking for their time. Instead of simply erasing Bacon from the frame, the effects team used motion capture suits, green screen bodysuits, and detailed CGI models of his muscles, organs, and skeleton to show Sebastian disappearing in stages, a truly layered transformation. The result, a creepy and memorable visual showcase that earned the film an Oscar nomination for Best Visual Effects. And yes, those effects took months to render. For example, the scene where Sebastian's body becomes invisible layer by layer took over 6 months to complete from concept to final cut. With a budget of around $95 million, this was one of Verhoeven's biggest productions, and despite mixed critical reception, it performed well at the box office, earning over $190 million worldwide. Audiences were drawn to the eerie premise, big-name cast, and the promise of a sci-fi horror story that asked, what would you do if no one could see you and no one could stop you? Verhoeven himself later called the film cold and admitted he was frustrated by studio limitations that prevented him from making it more philosophical or character-driven. Still, Hollow Man remains a slick, twisted ride through one man's unraveling morality and one of the most ambitious attempts at rendering invisibility ever put on screen. And one last fast fact, Kevin Bacon, despite being invisible for most of the movie, was on the set constantly performing in motion capture suits and prosthetics. He reportedly spent more time filming than any other actor, even though he literally is not visible for half the movie. So whether you're in it for the sci-fi, the scares, or the sheer digital wizardry, Hollow Man is a turn-of-the-millennium time capsule that dares to ask what happens when the man disappears but the monster remains. Alright, that is our Fast Forward Facts segment. Now we're going to jump right into what the critics said. The critics didn't have a lot good to say about this. Looking at our tomato meter on Rotten Tomatoes, we've got 25%, meaning 75% of the critics did not like this. Popcorn meter's 28%, so even your audience wasn't really big fans of it as from a review standpoint. Let's jump right into what the critics said. Anton Bittel from Little White Lies says the director keeps comfortably aligning the invisible cinema-goer's intrinsic voyeurism with Sebastian's own, showing us to what depths of depravity the male gaze can lead. Jay Boyer from Orlando Sentinel says Verhoeven just leaves you hanging. John Anderson from Newsday says the film's degree of viciousness, which certainly isn't limited to Cain's nocturnal wanderings, makes one hope Verhoeven isn't taking any potions. Jay Carr from Boston Globe says, if not for cable and video, Hollow Man would have been an invisible film. I kind of believe that. Tom Keogh, maybe, from Film.com, says the real Invisible Man here is Verhoeven, whose talent can barely be seen in Hollow Man. John Hartle from Seattle Times says there's so little of the Verhoeven touch in Hollow Man that it could have been directed by almost any studio hack. Lou Limerick from the New York Post says Hollow Man is just that, a hollow excuse for a movie. Kirk Honeycutt from the Hollywood Reporter says Verhoeven has in Hollow Man come up with a movie empty of purpose. Susan, I don't even know how to pronounce this name. This is somewhere from another part of the world, but I'll try. Susan Lazina, I don't know, from USA Today says, ultimately the title is most revealing. It's Hollow Man. And then Robert Horton from Film.com says, as Hollow Man scrambles towards its conclusion, the dialogue founders and logic retreats. Well, that is what the critics said, and they didn't seem to have too much solid to say about it. Moving right along to first time or 50th. Kind of looking at, okay, was this your first time to see this movie, or was it your 50th time, or somewhere in between, and how did that influence your viewing? This is a film I don't remember when it came out, as far as it wasn't like on my radar, I don't think, in 2000 when I was like 12 years old or something. But it's not a movie that I've watched a whole bunch over the years. It's a movie that I watched probably more on television than anywhere else. You know, it would come on TV, and that's where I saw it the most. But even then, I don't feel like I saw it a ton. But at the same time, I was very familiar with it. So watching it this time, I was very familiar with the film for the most part, but I don't remember this being a movie that I just watched a ton. Just one that I would catch occasionally on television. Or my memory of watching it is catching it on cable TV back in the day. But this was not a big film for me. This was not a something I watched over and over again. If I had to guess about how many times I've seen it over the years, I'd say, I don't know, like a handful of 6 or 8 times maybe, catching it here and there on TV, maybe bits and pieces, not even from the beginning to end, but from the middle or whatever point that it was. But yeah, that's my take on first time or 50th. Not a first time, but by far or far from a 50th, I should say. Moving along to be continued. Would a sequel work for this film? And if there is a sequel, should there have been? Well, there is a sequel, and it's called Hollow Man 2, and I have seen it, but it's been so long since I've seen it, I couldn't tell you a whole lot about it, and I'm not going to pretend I know too much about it, because it's not the one that I watched for this episode, but I know it has Christian Slater in it, and I'm pretty sure it was like a straight to DVD film. It wasn't something that came out in the movie theater, to my knowledge. I wouldn't imagine, with the reviews, I guess, that this one has, that the other one probably didn't do any better, if I had to guess. So I would assume that they probably shouldn't have made that movie. I would assume, I don't know, is it worth assuming? I don't know that they even would have gotten their money back on it. I'll have to check into that, but I would say, from a standpoint of money made, right, so we're looking at $95 million that this movie spent to make the film, and then a box office earning of around $190 million. But if you think about marketing and all that kind of stuff, this movie probably made not very much money. Maybe 10, 15 million. If that. I'm not sure what marketing costs and stuff were in 2000. I'm just kind of going off of what I would go off of things today. But I would say if they made a little bit of money, I guess it made sense to them for making the film. But like looking back now, or considering the information that I have now, I would say it was probably for the best had they just like not made the sequel, knowing how people feel about this one in large part, looking at the reviews and all that stuff. But I'm not going to say too much about the sequel in that, or I'm not going to say it's bad, because I don't remember. I've seen it, but it's been a long time. But at the same time, I'm not going to say that I think it was I won't say that I think it was good, or that I think it's probably good. I'm just not going to say it's bad because I don't know. But I know, looking at the ratings on this, I would assume they didn't make a better movie in the second one. That's my assumption. All right. Before we jump into the final segment, today's episode is brought to you by PrepStartsNow.com, your go-to spot for emergency and outdoor preparedness. If you're anything like me, you'd rather be prepared and not need it than need the essentials and not have them. From 72-hour emergency essentials to camping gear, car emergency essentials, multi-tools, first aid, and even home gardening supplies as you start growing some of your own food, they've got you covered for all of it. And the best part is, as a listener, you can use the promo code REWATCH to get a 15% site-wide discount, and you'll also be helping out the show as they give us a small reward for your business in the process. Head to PrepStartsNow.com/discount/rewatch. That's PrepStartsNow.com/discount/rewatch, or simply enter the code REWATCH at checkout and get prepared today. All right, with that down, let's move into the pre-final verdict segment here, where we just do a quick rundown of the film. It's been so long since I've seen the original Invisible Man film that it is, I couldn't tell you where, how far they stretched and what liberties they took. Clearly, this was a modern adaptation of that character or that idea or whatever you want to call it. But I wouldn't be able to sit here and go, here's where it differed and here's where it veered off and all that. I'm not going to be able to go there with you. It's been a long time. So I was a kid when I saw The Invisible Man last, the old school Invisible Man. So, this movie starts off with, it starts off basically with a animal, a gorilla, who is invisible. Like, they drop this rat and you're not sure what's going on, and then the rat gets snatched up and like bitten and killed by this gorilla. And you find out that there's an invisible gorilla, and then you start to learn that, like, okay, this invisible gorilla is being experimented on, and so you realize, okay, this is set in a lab. They're experimenting on a gorilla. They have now made this gorilla invisible, and then they have this serum that they're able to put into the gorilla that makes it not invisible anymore in time, or after going through some changes and some major issues and having to be revived with the electric paddles and all that. Anyway, the gorilla survives and is back to normal and being able to be seen. So we see at the beginning of the film that they have made an animal invisible, and then they have brought it back from being invisible to normal, and it survived. Then, as things go on and progress, Kevin Bacon's character, I believe, believes that he has solved they're all scientists who work in this lab, and they're essentially working for the government, and they're working on this invisibility project. So they have realized how to make a person invisible. They think they know how to make them not invisible anymore, or bring them back from the invisibility. But they go to the government guys and they say, hey, we're not quite there yet. And so Elizabeth Shue's character says, why did you tell them that was the case? Because that's not the case. We think we are there. And he's like, well, I don't want them to not need us anymore. So they're lying just so they can keep going doing what they're doing. And Kevin Bacon's character decides that he is going to be the human that tries it. So he goes through making him invisible, doing the thing. And then after being invisible for a while, they go through the process of injecting him to bring him back from invisibility. And when they try to start doing that, he nearly dies, and they end up having to re-inject him with the stuff to make him invisible again. So then it becomes this thing where he's invisible and he doesn't want to be at the time, and he's struggling with it, and he can't see he can't close his eyes, can't really sleep. You can imagine that's what would mess with your head, as far as never being able to close your eyes and all that stuff. So there's this whole period where he doesn't want to be invisible, and he's struggling with all of it, and he starts to get, whatever you want to call it, cabin fever, and leaves and does some shady stuff as he leaves, but then he comes back and he's just kind of messing with people and realizing that he can do things. Oh, I can do this, or I can do that, and I can do this, and nobody can see me, nobody knows it's me, nobody knows what's going on. Ultimately, what ends up happening is he starts going more and more crazy and more wild, because this is not only is the probably the serum that made him invisible getting to his brain, but he's also invisible and nobody can see him, and he's kind of being stuck in a lab, and like all of it's starting to get to him and make him go crazy. Well, in time, he realizes that I can't remember exactly what's going on. Oh yeah, he sneaks out. So he sneaks out one last time, and they basically get to the point, the people that he's working with, Elizabeth Shue, Josh Brolin, they're like, hey, like this has gone too far. He's gone too far, leaving the lab, going out and doing whatever. Like, we're gonna have to like go let them know what's happening. So they go and they tell one of the government official guys what went on, and they think like, okay, we're losing our job, but at least they're gonna take care of all this. And they let him know about it, and before he can get even through the night, Kevin Bacon is invisible, and he's watching them as they have this conversation with this guy. And after they leave, he drowns the guy in his pool. So the next day they go into the lab, and they realize I think they confront Kevin Bacon's character about it. Then they realize that the guy is dead, that no calls have been made, that nobody knows about anything still. Then the phones go out at the lab. It's an underground lab. And next thing you know, Kevin Bacon's character has gone crazy and decided he's going to kill everybody and destroy all the evidence and get rid of anybody who knows basically that he's in the condition that he's in, so that he can essentially live as an invisible man and have nobody to answer to, and nobody knows it. So he goes through this process of trying to kill everybody in the lab. Little by little, he starts taking people out, and you get down to your last two characters, Josh Brolin and Elizabeth Shue, who are on their way out. They think that they have stopped him. They think they've killed him or whatever, and they're climbing up an elevator shaft, and he somehow has survived, and he climbs up the elevator shaft too, and he grabs a hold of her. They fall to this elevator. They're on top of the elevator, and she grabs the elevator cable, and somehow does something to release the elevator or whatever. So she's holding the cable, and he falls to his death. And it ends up just her and Josh Brolin survive the whole thing. And then they have to climb back up the elevator shaft to get to the top, and that's pretty much how the movie ended. So it's a big movie about a guy that realizes that he can take this kind of power that he has, if you will, and use it wrongly, and goes nuts with it, and it ends up turning very bad. But that is this version of The Invisible Man in Hollow Man for you. There's a quick recap, or maybe not so quick recap. With that down, let's jump right into the final verdict, which is the whole point and purpose of this podcast. This is where we put the film to the test across 10 categories, scored on a scale from 1 to 5, and that scale looks like this: 1 is poor, 2 is weak, 3 is fair, 4 is good, and 5 is excellent. Now, when we add all of those up at the end, we will determine where on the verdict scale that it falls, and the verdict scale looks like this: 10 to 20 is a return, 20 to 30 is return worthy, unless you're feeling nostalgic. 30 to 40 is a leans rewatch but debatable, and 40 to 50 is certified rewatchable. As we go through this, we will tally them up at the end and see where this thing lands. Let's start with story and plot. Is the narrative compelling and coherent? Does it still hold up on a rewatch? I think, in my opinion, the narrative or the plot of this film is probably the best thing about this film. Maybe I may be speaking too soon. Later on, I may decide different as we get through here. But there's a lot of stuff that's like super questionable about this. There's a lot of things about what would kill a person and how does a person survive something, and some silly stuff that would we'll talk about later. But as far as just the story and plot of like the idea of people working in a government lab trying to make people invisible, they are able to do so. Now, once they've made someone invisible, they try to make them visible again, and things go wrong in the process, and they're unable to do that, and that drives a person crazy, and that person who's in that position is already a little unstable, already pretty selfish, already doesn't care about other people, and so that would lead that person to go the route that he went. And so the story and the plot makes sense to me. And because of that, I am going to give this a 4 out of 5. I'm changing it in real time here. Meaning, yeah, changing it in real time here. I had it at a 3.5. I upped it to a 4 because I realized this is the first time I've had this conversation with myself or with you, that's how I feel about it. So for story and plot, I give it a 4 out of 5 for the reasons that I just told you. Moving on to characters and performances. Are the characters memorable and well acted, or forgettable and flat? Here's where I'm probably going to rub some people the wrong way, maybe. I don't think that Kevin Bacon is a bad actor. I think he's great given the right role. And there's many roles that he's been in that I really, really enjoy him in. At the same time, I think that he has a tendency to play everything the same way. Or like, he has a tendency to play every emotion the same way. Which is, I don't even know how to describe it. Because I'm not knocking Kevin Bacon. I like Kevin Bacon as an actor. I just think that maybe certain direction or certain things that are asked of him as an actor aren't really like in his wheelhouse, or maybe it's just me. I don't like him going certain places or trying certain things because it comes out as like overacting and over the top and not sincere. It feels like he is acting in certain things, you know what I mean? Like, I want to believe it, and some things just aren't believable. And sometimes when he goes over the top or gets super emotional or really angry or whatever, some of those moments to me, not even just in this movie, but in general, in Kevin Bacon acting world, don't come across as genuine to me. So, there's nothing special about the acting in this film. I think, like, probably the best performance in this was probably, in my opinion, I don't want to take away from Kevin Bacon playing an invisible guy. Like, I think he does really well in this film. And don't get me wrong, that's not what I'm saying when I say, I'm just saying this is not my favorite Kevin Bacon performance turned in. You know what I mean? Although I think he does a good job for what he's doing. I don't even know how to explain what I'm trying to say, which is really irritating me right now. I'm like really bothered that I can't get out. I can't properly communicate what it is that I'm feeling and thinking about this. I don't think there's anything special about the acting in this film, and I think some of it is a little flat and B-movie-ish and whatever. So there's nothing super special about the acting in this movie overall. And because of that, I'm going to give it a 3.5 for characters and performances. I'm not saying anybody did a terrible job as far as your main characters. Some of your supporting cast and surrounding people were a little, I don't know, just like didn't feel, it just take it. I'm just saying, I'm just stop right here. I don't need to hang forever on this. I'm just stopping right there. Characters and performances, I've given it a 3 out of 5. And just put it in that fair mid area. Moving on to pacing and entertainment value. Were you entertained the whole time? Did the movie keep your attention? Does it feel too slow, too rushed, or just right? Okay, so the odd thing about this, for all the faults of this movie, and I feel like there are a lot, for all the faults that the movie has, it's still a very entertaining movie that doesn't like lose you. It's just, as you're entertained, you're also like, come on. It's like really weird. There's this weird dichotomy of this is ridiculous, or you gotta be kidding me, or that, did he really just say that, or whatever. This is this weird thing of like, I'm entertained the whole time, I'm sucked into what's going on, but at the same time, I am not necessarily thinking this is the best movie I've ever seen by any means. So, from a pacing and entertainment value standpoint, I'm going to give this a 3.5 out of 5 and say that it is between fair and good there. And I would put it a little higher if it weren't for the fact that some things cause me to sit and go like, come on, man, come on, did you really do that? But like at the same time, I'm entertained while I'm thinking that and saying that. Moving right along to dialogue and quotability. Are there iconic or memorable lines? Do people still quote it? Does the dialogue feel natural or cringy? Here's where this one really fell apart for me. Okay, dialogue and quotability. I don't think there's any iconic or memorable lines in this film necessarily. I think like there's a lot of the dialogue and a lot of the written stuff that to me is like unnecessarily vulgar, that doesn't add anything to the film, and that's just my perspective. Sometimes like that stuff just annoys me, to be honest with you. I don't like, there's some cheesy, kind of just dumb of its time, or early 2000s cheesy lines and what. So I don't think this movie's really quotable. I don't think there's a lot that's really memorable. I don't think there's anything at all. It's not the most natural feeling a lot of the time. It's a little forced feeling at times from dialogue and quotability perspective. So I'm giving dialogue and quotability a 2.6 out of 5. It's not even going to touch fair for me. I think it's going to lean on the fair side of weak. If that makes sense for you. Dialogue and quotability 2.6 out of 5. Moving along to soundtrack and score. Does the music enhance the film or date it? Does it elevate the emotional tone of the film or feel out of place? Is it iconic or generic? It just is there. I've probably said this before. There's two ways to go about film scores. There's the way that says you would not notice me being here, but you would notice if I wasn't there, right? So there's that approach to film score, and then there's the like iconic, add to, half and partly makes the movie film score. This does definitely not fall there. There may be some generic. There's a little bit of generic. There's a somewhat generic side to the score of this film, but it's more in that I'm here but you don't notice me kind of thing. But I don't think that's necessarily terrible by any means. So from a soundtrack and score perspective, that category is going to get a 3.5 out of me. It's just fair. Cinematography and visual style. Is the visually engaging or stylish, regardless of effects budget or genre? Do the camera work and effects still impress, or do they look dated or clunky? Okay, knowing the other films that this guy has made, RoboCop, Starship Troopers, Total Recall, those movies alongside this feel like they have a thing about them, and this feels like it's missing that thing that those all have. Like they have a vibe about their look and everything. This does not feel that way. This feels very early 2000s. It feels like many other movies that I watched of that time. Particularly, I was thinking this movie, while the concepts are completely different, this movie made me feel or visually, this movie gave me like Deep Blue Sea vibes. If you've ever seen that film, not saying that's a bad film. I'm just saying there was something about the early 2000s where, like, I was just thinking about how The look of, not in the comic panel sense of things, but just the overall visual look of Ang Lee's The Hulk. This movie, Deep Blue Sea. There's just a lot of movies from that era that are kind of, they just kind of all look the same, and I don't think it's super stylish by any means. Some of the effects, I get that they were great effects at the time, or award-winning effects at the time, and I think from a capability standpoint, maybe I get that, but considering that The Mummy came out in 1999, and knowing the effects in The Mummy, there was a way that they used the effects in that movie that felt more right, more like better lit, all that stuff. This feels really fake in too much of the time. Fake enough that it pulls you out of things, especially now. And even the decisions that were made on so much of what went on with this, just for example, there's a scene when he is supposed to be invisible laying in the bed. And as I sit here and breathe, I don't feel like I'm pressed any more into the couch, that this couch is behind me. I'm not pushing any more into it deeply and shallowly or whatever as I take breaths. But there's a scene, or there's a spot where he's invisible, and it's a cool effect or whatever. You know what I'm saying? Like, it looks like their bed is really doing something, but as he's supposed to be breathing, the indention in the bed that he's making is coming up and down and up and down. It's like, well, if he's laying there, his chest might be moving, but I don't think the bed itself, he's not becoming less weighty and move like that. So there's things like that where I'm like, fine, you made the bed look like it was doing something that looked real, but the mind behind how that would actually happen, you're just making it do something to make it do something, but that's not even realistic. And then there's some other stuff. I will say that the hair on the gorilla, as it comes back to being visual or visible, the hair looked really good. There's some really cool effects stuff when it comes to starting to show the vascular system as you see the things come into the serum come into them, and so you can see there's just some really cool what's the word I'm looking for? Anyway, there's some really cool effects when it comes to those visuals, but when it gets to the point of like him being sort of mostly tendons and muscles and things like that, but you don't see skin, things start to look like really fake, really shiny, really not good. And I get it. It was 2000, but still, like, there's a way. Whatever. I'm just talking. This is just my opinion. There's some really good visual effects stuff in this film, I guess is what I'm saying. There's even some good I think the practical gorilla that they used after the gorilla that was supposed to come back to being visible again, and they put it back in the cage and all that. Like, that was a good, really solid practical gorilla suit, a gorilla thing. It was clearly practical and clearly wasn't a gorilla, but there were some not realistic movements, but it looked really good. The effects are great, and then at the same time, there's a lot of effects that just like pull me out of it. And I also think that some of the shots, the rest of the movie was just normal. It just felt normal. It didn't feel stylistic. It didn't feel whatever. But the places where he's supposed to be invisible and he's supposed to be watching people, the way that they chose to go like extremely handheld with those, and the way that they were shot, I really, really enjoyed and really liked, and they gave you the feel of like you were him watching, or you were right behind him over his shoulder, or you were seeing from his vantage point, or whatever. I really liked the way that they did that. I thought that it felt realistic. It felt like you were, like I said, you were seeing things from his perspective, and that he was being a sneaky creep. So I really enjoyed that. All that said, I'll just say, okay, cinematography and visual style, I'm going to give a 3.8 out of 5 because there was some stuff that I feel was too plasticky, too fake, too whatever. But then there's also some stuff that's like really, 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 really good. And I really like some of the camera work, but then some of the camera work feels very just generic and whatever. So I feel like that 3.8 area feels right. So cinematography and visual style, for me, I'm putting it at a 3.8 out of 5. Moving on to originality and creativity. Does the film feel fresh and inspired, or like something you've seen 100 times? Was the film groundbreaking or formulaic? Does it bring something unique? I don't know. I don't know how inspired it is as far as fresh and new. It's a new take on an old idea, so it's not like it's super duper original. I don't know how different it is right now without going and watching the old Invisible Man and Invisible Man Returns. Without going and watching those, I don't know how much they strayed away from that or how like they put their own spin on things from an originality perspective. But the fact that it is simply taking an old idea of a guy who becomes invisible and goes nuts, I don't think it's like super fresh and inspired. I don't think at the time we hadn't really seen anything like this. So I think as far as like something you've seen 100 times, I don't feel like it was that. I feel like it had some newness and some freshness as far as showing us the visuals that we saw. And it may have been groundbreaking from a special effects perspective, but I don't really think that it was. I feel, like I said, I have better feelings towards the special effects in... the reason I'm thinking about it is because in The Mummy, right? That's another property along the line of The Invisible Man and things. But The Mummy had a character who was having more and more of himself appear, becoming more and more human throughout the thing. And so there was this... You get what I'm saying if you've seen the movie. So I thought that those looked better, and they did a better job in The Mummy at making me buy it than this. So I don't think that it was necessarily groundbreaking, but I don't think it was really formulaic. I don't think it really brought... I think the uniqueness was the visual creativity of like what we're going to show you, if that makes sense. I don't think like this was groundbreaking in the sense of what they were able to do, what the capability they had, but I think like it brought something unique in the visuals that it showed you, in showing you a vascular system begin to appear out of nowhere and start to completely become full, and then the next thing you know, you're seeing your muscles and tendons and bone and all this stuff kind of begin to show and grow and be there. Like that, I think was a very unique thing to be seen. I don't know that we'd seen anything like that up to that point. So that was solid. With all that said, originality and creativity, given everything I just said, I'm going to put it at a 3.5 out of 5 and move right along to theme and message. Is there a deeper takeaway, and does it explore ideas that resonate today? I think the takeaway from this, and even older films, is that when we like lose our humanity, right? When that is sort of taken away from us, which kind of it is in this, it can mess with our heads. There's that. But also, particularly in this film, it's I think it's a kind of a commentary on what person who's not the most straight-lined, or whatever you want to call it, who doesn't answer to anything other than themselves and doesn't get their morals and values from somewhere solid and unchanging. If that person has the ability to gain power and then does not have anything keeping them in check, things can get out of hand very quickly, and that person can abuse that power. I think this is definitely a commentary on the abuse of power and that kind of this God complex of which is the case with many of your sort of horror, killer, whatever situations where a person doesn't have respect for life, doesn't have respect for other people, doesn't have respect for humanity, whatever, and it's all about using whatever I can to get what I want, and that's what this becomes here. Now, he supposedly has gone crazy, and some of it had to do with the serum and all, but ultimately, I think from a theme and message perspective, there is a deeper takeaway, and it is that power and unchecked ability can go to someone's head and have cause a very bad turn and some very bad things. And so, from a theme and message perspective, I am giving this one a 3.2 out of 5. I would say also, from a theme and message perspective, some things we're just not supposed to fiddle with, and like I think there's a little bit of that in this too. Like, hey, like there's no reason to mess with certain things, and all you're doing is leading to some not great things. It's like a lot of people could say that about the nuclear bomb or whatever. There's a lot to be said about that, and that's a whole different discussion. I'm not saying one way or the other. I'm saying people's commentary on that is, in many cases, it should have never been messed with to begin with. That shooting for that ability should never been messed with to begin with by anybody. That's not my commentary on it. That's just me knowing what people say. But this is very much a thought of like, why would you look for the ability to be invisible? What would be the point and purpose of that? Unless you have nefarious reasons to use it. I mean, like even from a government's perspective, what are you going to do with that? Are you going to make your soldiers invisible, or are you going to have special ops invisibility? Who knows? But it just seems a little bit like that's something that you shouldn't mess with anyway. And I think there's a little bit of that message that can be learned in this too, is just don't fiddle with things that don't need to be fiddled with, and leave them alone, and let normal be normal, Moving along to cringe factor. Are there any jokes, effects, or moments that haven't aged well or were always bad? Moments that make you wince now, campy, cheesy, bad effects, outdated jokes that aren't funny, etc. Yeah, I think there's one. I think there's some stupid, crude jokes in this movie that I don't appreciate, just because I don't appreciate crude humor, to be honest with you. Especially when you are making entertainment and you want to appeal to as many people as possible. Does it hold up? No, sorry. So yeah, I think there's some crude jokes. I think some of the effects are a little cringy at times, while others are absolutely fantastic, but still. Moments that haven't aged well, maybe a little bit. There's some campy and some cheesy stuff in this film, as far as like some dialogue and jokes and some very sort of just like I said, unnatural dialogue. Anyway, from a cringe factor perspective, I'm giving this a 2.8 out of 5. I do feel like there's, everything else aside, there's a lot of cringe in this movie. I felt it as I watched it last night. That's my cringe factor score. A 2.8 out of 5 on the cringe factor scale. Moving on to nostalgia and rewatchability. Does it hold up to your memory of it? Does it still matter today? Is it timeless? Has it aged poorly? Does a rewatch ruin the magic? And would you honestly watch it again? Does it hold up to your memory of it? I remember liking this movie more than I did when I watched it this time around. It's been a while. It's been a handful of years. It's been a good while since I've seen this film. And I watched it again for this, and my feeling was, I remember this being a much better movie, or I remember liking this movie much better, or I don't remember certain things that turned me off about the film have being an issue before. So maybe because I saw the made-for-television version of things, or I don't know. Either way, I remember watching this movie this time, my feeling was, it's not as good as I remember it being, or my feelings for it weren't as positive as they were before. I don't think it really matters today. I think if I was going to pick a more modern day take on the Invisible Man, the Invisible Man from like 2015 or no 2020 maybe, whenever it was, that was a killer movie in my opinion. As far as mattering today and being original and all, man, like we're gonna have to get to that one because like that is some solid stuff. I really enjoy that film. Is it timeless? This movie? No. I mean, I think the Invisible Man, the idea of the Invisible Man, and they'll continue to make Invisible Man movies. That is timeless. This film is not timeless. Has it aged poorly? Maybe a little bit. Yeah. I mean, not terribly, but I don't think like it's really like gotten better with age or just like not changed at all with age. I think like from the time it came out to now, it appears a little bit more negatively than it did before. To me, does a rewatch ruin the magic? Yeah, I mean, like I think the rewatch did ruin a little bit of the positive vibes that I had about this film. It didn't ruin the movie for me. It's just like I'll watch the movie again. I just didn't feel about it watching it this time around that I did or can remember feeling before. So for nostalgia and rewatchability, I'm giving it a 2.8 out of 5. All right, now let's score this thing up, tally it up, and see where this dude landed on our verdict scale. Story and plot, I gave a 4 out of 5. Characters and performances, I gave a 3 out of 5. Pacing and entertainment value, I gave a 3.5 out of 5. Dialogue and quotability, 2.6 out of 5. Soundtrack and score, 3 out of 5. Cinematography and visual style, 3.8 out of 5. Originality and creativity, 3.5 out of 5. Theme and message, 3.2 out of 5. Cringe factor, 2.8 out of 5. And then nostalgia and rewatchability, 2.8 out of 5, bringing the total to 32.2 out of 5 on the verdict scale, meaning that this movie is just a hair outside of the return worthy into leans rewatch, but debatable. I feel like, so initially, to be honest with you, before I sat down and was talking about it, and I was just going through and like scoring off the top of my head as I was quickly thinking about these and giving them scores. This movie scored lower. It was still in the return worthy, in the leans rewatch, but it was like barely in the leans rewatch by like a half a point, or something like that. So sitting down and talking to you, essentially talking to myself, thinking out a little more long form, it ended up getting a better score than it did initially for me. Sometimes that happens, sometimes it doesn't. But, yeah, it did. So 32.2 on the verdict scale, meaning that this leans rewatch, but debatable, and I think heavily debatable for some people, clearly by the, whatever you want to call it, the ratings or the critics and even the popcorn meter for the audience score being a 25% and 28%. Clearly, a lot of people have some negative thoughts about this film. But I think while it's not a movie that I'm going to go back and watch regularly, it's a movie that if I catch it on, I'm going to watch it. It's just not, like, by any means something I'm going to seek out, probably. I don't. It was a bit of a letdown this time around, and I was kind of just like wanting it to hurry up and get over with. There's a lot of silly to it, but it was like trying to take itself seriously while not doing a really good job of that, if that makes any sense. Anyway, with all that down, that is going to be the end of this episode. If you are on YouTube and you are enjoying yourself, or you have watched this episode, or you've watched other episodes as well, and you like it and you want to come back for more, or you want to know when new episodes are coming out, do the whole like and subscribe thing on YouTube so you can keep up with stuff, and it's also very helpful for the algorithm to show this to more people and to you as they come out. Comment down in the comment section underneath. Let me know what you think about the film. I'd love to have conversations about movies, period, at all. If you are on the podcast platforms, Spotify, Amazon, Apple, any of that stuff, and you have something to say, you can always go to Instagram.com or the Instagram app for Rewatch or Return, and comment on the post that is related to this episode in particular. All of that stuff is super helpful, and it keeps me entertained for sure. I always love to talk movies, and like I've said before, this is all subjective. This doesn't have to be your score. You don't have to feel like I feel about this movie. Just don't hate me for thinking different than you, and I won't hate you for thinking different than me, because there's nothing that says we have to feel any way about anything. It's all art. It's all subjective. I'll say that every time. This is just where my score landed, and if I did this tomorrow, I might land in a completely different space, to be honest with you. It's just how I was feeling about things as I thought about them in the moment. So anyway, with all that down, that's going to be the end of this episode, and I will see you next week.